Good afternoon, and welcome to the Museo's afternoon of author series. And this is the first of this new year. We want to wish you all a wonderful new year and lots of opportunities of reading and writing fantastic books. I am Carol Latham, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Muzeo Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim. And it is our wish that you and your family are all safe and healthy and that you stay that way, especially during this new year. During this afternoon's presentation, we will share the links for each of the authors and any additional information you might require for book sales, etc. Please enter any of your questions into the chat, and we will try our best to have as many of them answered during the presentation. As you know, this is being recorded on Facebook Live. It is my pleasure this afternoon to welcome Maddie Margarita of LitUp OC. Maddie is a writer and host of LitUp OC, a popular writer salon in Tustin, California, on which her podcast, Author on the Air Network, is featured. She's on the board of Sisters in Crime and the Southern California Writers Association. Maddie will be introducing our three authors this afternoon, and so sit back, relax, and enjoy this afternoon's presentation with Maddie Margarita and our authors. Maddie?
Thank you, Carol. Happy New Year, everyone. On behalf of LitUp OC and our panel, Christopher Reich, Matt Coyle, and Nick Petrie, I'd like to thank you for inviting us into the amazing virtual world of the Museo. I'm honored to introduce our stellar panel today. And I have to tell you, I'm personally very excited. I think it's going to be entertaining, but no pressure, guys. Okay, here we go. Our first author is Christopher Reich. Chris is the New York Times bestselling author of 13 novels. Did I get that right, Chris? 13?
They keep on getting more, so that sounds close enough.
All right. Seven standalone thrillers, 3 in the Jonathan Ransom series, and 3 books in his current Simon Risk series. His books have won numerous awards, and his novel, The Patriots Club, won the International Thriller Writers Award for Best Novel. In his latest novel, The Palace, 3rd in the Simon Risk series, international spy Simon Risk becomes nothing less than the most wanted man in the world. Chris lives in Encinitas, California, and he's joining us today from Malibu, California. Our next author is Matt Coyle. Matt is the best-selling author of the Rick Cahill crime series. Blind Vigil is the 7th in his award-winning series, which also includes, let's see if I get this right, Matt. Yesterday's Echo, Night Tremors, Dark Fishers, Blood Truth, Wrong Light, and Lost Tomorrows. Yay. His novels have won the Anthony Award, Lefty Award, and have been nominated for numerous Mccarthy and Shamus Awards. Matt lives in San Diego with his yellow lab, Angus, and Matt is joining us from San Diego today. Our final author today is Nick Petrie. Nick received his MFA in fiction from the University of Washington. His first novel, The Drifter, won the International Thriller and Thriller Awards and Barry Awards, and was nominated for an Edgar, Anthony, and Hammett Awards. Wow. I have a problem reading all those names in a row. I don't know why, Nick. He won the 2016 Literary Award from the Wisconsin Library Association and was named one of Apple's 10 writers to read in 2017. He has written 6 books in the Peter Ash series, including The Drifter, Burning Light, Light It Up, Tear It Down, The Wild One, and his latest, The Breaker. A husband and father, Nick has worked as a carpenter, remodeling contractor, and building inspector. He lives in Milwaukee, where he is hard at work. Well, actually, he's not hard at work on his next novel. He's here with us. So Nick is joining us from Milwaukee. So that's our panel of esteemed authors today. So since it's a new year, we're going to be abiding by generally accepted accounting principles of LIFO. So the last in is first out. So Nick, you're first. What What can you tell us about The Breaker, and what was it about that story that made you want to write it?
Well, the Breaker begins with Peter Ash, the protagonist of this series, living a fairly low-profile life in Milwaukee, renovating houses with his friend Lewis, trying to avoid the attention of the police. Unfortunately, he's having lunch with Lewis and June in downtown Milwaukee when June notices a man with an assault rifle walking into the Milwaukee public market. Peter and Lewis take off after the gunman, hoping to prevent a bloodbath, but nothing is as expected, and the events that follow are stranger than Peter ever imagined, and certainly nothing I planned as the writer, including a troubled inventor, a ruthless tech thief, a cheerful assassin, and revolutionary technology that may just change the world forever. So that's my little elevator pitch about this book. So I write about a Marine Corps veteran who was having trouble adjusting to his life after his war experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's got post-traumatic stress that takes the form of claustrophobia, which means he's having trouble being inside for long periods of time. And the series is, in essence, his journey from, sort of really being essentially homeless to, finding love and finding purpose and meaning in his life. And that's sort of my goal through this as the series progresses. This book in particular came about because, and it seems sort of quaint and irrelevant in the light of this week's strange, political stuff, which I hope we don't get into here. But for the last year or so, there's been a lot of discussion about the power of tech companies. And how really just a few people, a few dozen, at most a few hundred people, are really setting policy, making giant decisions that affect, billions of us across the world. And so that's one of the issues that I'm exploring with this book. My series does tend to examine social issues and put them in the context of a hopefully an entertaining and a vivid, essential, something a story that you can, feel and see and smell. I'm very interested in place as well. It's a strange thing to I'm not a veteran myself, and it's a strange thing to write about a life that's different from your own. But I got plugged into this community because in my former life as a freelance building inspector, you would hire somebody like me to evaluate the house that you were buying. And at a certain point, I realized I had all of these clients who were coming back from war, and they were, some of them were just fine, but some of them were definitely not just fine. And one of the strange things about me is that people tell me all kinds of strange things. Strangers walk up to me, in line at the grocery store or in the waiting room in the airport. People tell me strange stuff, and it's also part of the relationship of being a freelance building inspector, where I am present at a moment in people's lives when that they know they're never going to see me again, and there's a lot of emotion in that moment of buying a home, especially if it's your first home. And so, again, we'd be down in the basement looking at the furnace or the foundation, and people would be telling me things about their lives. And I kind of fell in love with these young men and women who had given up so much for essentially the idea of America. And so that's kind of what got me started down this path.
Okay. Well, I'm waiting for your next novel about somebody who wants to murder their contractor, and I will definitely buy that. And I think I know a lot of people. I think that could be a potential best-selling premise. So, all right. So, okay, let's move on. Chris, what about you? Do you want to talk a little bit about the palace and why you decided to write that story from Malibu?
Sure. It's good to be in Malibu. So all my books are set overseas, international locations. I was brought up all over the place. I was born in Japan. I lived in Switzerland and France, and sent to schools there kind of against my will now and then. So I draw upon that background to write my books. And these books star this guy, Simon Riss, who's an American living in London. He'd grown up in France and had a past is kind of an organized criminal, really the toughest of the tough, like the worst of the Sopranos kind of, but in the French gangs, and then spent time in prison and kind of, found his true north, reoriented his compass kind of, and became a good guy and a force for good. So he lives in London fixing these Ferraris, these really cool cars. But what he really does is he undertakes missions for intelligence agencies, wealthy individuals, corporations who can't be seen to do that himself. And so that gives me a lot of room to write all kinds of fun stories. The Palace is where one of his old buddies, Raphael de Bourbon, gets caught up in problems in Thailand, and Simon has to fly out to Thailand to save him. And he finds out that, of course, like these books, he's in the middle of a much bigger conspiracy that takes him from Thailand to Singapore and eventually to Cannes in the south of France. So my books are really fun to write. I think I'm more fun having these flights of imagination. It certainly beats jinx, when you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day. At least you can imagine yourself in more glamorous climes.
Okay, so if you're looking for travel and escape, Chris's books are a great source of that, a great respite. Okay, so last but not least, Matt Coyle, do you want to talk a little bit about Blind Vigil?
Sure. Chris was talking about sitting for 8 hours at a desk, thinking about interesting climbs, beautiful climbs. I was thinking about being in the dark. My character, Rick Cahill, this is the seventh book. My character, Rick Cahill, is a ex-cop he's from San Diego, but he was a cop in Santa Barbara where his wife was murdered about 14 or 15 years ago now. He was arrested for the crime, but never tried, never exonerated. And that was kind of the propulsion for the first 6 books, where this dark cloud of being suspected for his wife's murder and also feeling somewhat responsible for her death, for actions he took the night she died, but not knowing who killed her and how she died. And that was all finally came to an ending in Lost Tomorrow's the last book. But at the end, I mean, this book's called Blind Vigil, so you kind of have an idea something happened to him that. So I mean, it's not really a spoiler. So he had traumatic event at the end of the last book, and now he's vision impaired, and as Blind Vigil opens, and he's not really a private eye anymore. He doesn't want to be. He didn't really want to be even before he lost his eyesight. But his life has changed. He's in a better place emotionally, but he doesn't really know what he's going to do in terms of making a living or his next quest. And he's in a good relationship, which is unusual for him too. But he's sort of bumbling along otherwise. And a sometime partner of his, Maura McFarlane, asked for help in a case. She just wants him to listen to this an interview she has with a guy who used to be a good friend of his, a very good friend of his, and she just wants to have him listen to his voice and make sure that what he's telling her is true, and that he's not unstable. He does, and things happen.
Okay, things happen. There you go. So you are a mean man. You're a mean author. Nice man, mean author. And I was reading your protagonist, Rick Cahill, is so tortured that this is one of my favorite lines from one of your reviews that I read. It was, over the 6-book series, Rick Cahill has carried more baggage than a major airline. Okay, so you are doing your job in creating obstacles and challenges for Rick, but in this book, in Blind Vigil, you also decided to create a challenge for yourself in writing a protagonist that was one-sided, who's now hearing impaired, visually impaired. How did you go about doing that and putting yourself in that position and trying to describe things that nobody can see to your readers?
Yeah, that was the hard part. I cursed myself for putting myself in that position many times. I had at the end of Lost Tomorrows, when Rick has lost his vision, there is a possibility for it to come back, and it's all medically realistic. I'm not sure about the time frame, but and I can't even remember the medical terms, but there is a possibility for his vision coming back. So as I'm sitting down and trying to write this book for months and getting nowhere, I thought that, you didn't get the opening where his vision could come back, and you could have had it come back between books, and now he's, he just wears glasses. But I thought, well, that would cheapen the end, the power of the ending of the last book, and it would be kind of a cop out. But I was so unsure that I could carry the book, going over the difficulties you mentioned, to make it interesting for this vision impaired character to describe, what's going on when he really can't see. That I had when I was writing the first draft, I had a third person character, which I've never had any of my books. I write first person. They're all Rick Cahill's head. And he was a bad guy, and he was watching from without and watching Rick and Moira, and really nasty guy, which I enjoyed writing. And I'd written third person since college, which was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Sorry.
I think that's funny, huh? So I put him in every 3 chapters or so. And then after I got to, maybe 100 pages, I realized, well, you have to write it in Rick's point of view all the way. That's the character. And once I finally figured out how to do it, this is just Rick. He's messed up anyway. How would he deal with the situation? And I eventually ended up pulling out that third person character. But yeah, it was difficult. I did research, obviously. I met a couple of women, or I talked to one on the phone. I met this other one who had lost their vision as adults. One was in her 40s, which would be about the time for Rick. The other one was a younger woman who I actually dedicated the book to, who I met at a Vaughn's. I used to see her walking around as I was writing this book. I hadn't really done my blind research yet. Except for online, I hadn't really talked to anyone. I'd see her in Vaughn's, and I thought, well, with her cane, and I thought, gosh, I should talk to her. But then I thought, well, I'm going to go and shoot on her life, like tap her on the back and from the dark. Hey, can you help me with this book? But one day I was walking over there, and she was out front with a couple of Vaughn's employees, and she knows the area well, but she was never been to the Vaughn's subway shop, or the subway shop, sandwich shop around the corner. And I said, hey, I'll take you. And she put her trust in me, and I walked her over there, and we spent about 4 hours together, and we've talked many times since. And she gave me a lot of great insight. She's really a special, courageous person. But yeah, it was difficult. I bought a cane and walked around at night a little bit. And I would, when I was out in areas that I'd be writing about, I did close my eyes sometimes and walk around, but I wouldn't really want to be bumping into people. But yeah, it was difficult. For months and months, I thought I was a complete idiot to attempt it. At least for my writer skill. I'm sure there's a lot of other writers who can do it well. But eventually, once I realized, well, this is just a Rick book, and it's just another obstacle for Rick. So how's he going to deal with it? And then once I got into that kind of warped area, then I felt right at home.
in the warped area.
Yeah.
Well, it's really funny when I listen to you guys talk. The writing advice that is given a lot of times is write what you know. But now we have you writing Rick as visually impaired, and we have Nick, writing about a war veteran. So before we get to Chris, I just wanted to ask Nick, Peter Ash is very different from Rick Cahill. But what is your favorite thing about him and writing him, because he is so different from you? And what do you think makes your reader root for him in all the scrapes and terrible situations that you put him in?
Well, Peter has been through a difficult chunk of time, but he really, I tried to give him really the best of what I saw in those young men and women, which is this big heart, and really what he really wants to do in life is to be useful. I met all these vets who signed up after 9/11 because they wanted to do some good and to be useful and to defend their country, and Peter is sort of in that same cohort. And I think that he doesn't always do good things. He's definitely not a total white hat person. He's outside the law. There's a fair amount of violence in his life, but he's not, I'm actually surprised that, people really readers are really like him, which is really heartening, but certainly more than I expected as a writer, that this character in this series would resonate with so many people. But in one of my early events, somebody asked me, if Peter was like my avatar, and I said, "Oh, no, we're nothing alike." And my wife, who was in the audience, just burst out laughing. And we certainly have sort of the same sense of humor. And I am somebody who, like Peter, I have a profound sense of right and wrong, and I really try to be useful in the world as well. But I think, in terms of sort of post-traumatic stress and claustrophobia, it really shows up as panic attacks. And I think, it's funny, especially in the last, 9 or 10 months, we are all living in this very strange existence. And I think there's a new resonance to somebody who is, sort of battling their own internal demons to try to sort of put together a life that works. I mean, there's a kind of a new level of empathy involved with something like that. So I don't know, it's a strange thing. If I knew exactly what I was doing, I would have done it long ago. I'm really sort of making it up as I go along, and I really feel lucky that actually people are interested in reading these stories.
Well, they're great stories, and they're so different. But one of the things that, even though all of your characters are so different, they have in common is they all tend to have their own moral code, which might not necessarily be the same as somebody you'd be sitting next to at Subway. And I think that's definitely the case for Simon Risk. So, Chris, you've written the standalones and series, and you've written lots of different protagonists. What makes Simon different from your other protagonists, and what is it about him that you like the most?
First, let me say, when you write these books, these thrillers, there's a saying that's often the thriller's only as good as the bad guy. Okay. And it's always more fun, I think, as Matt was saying, when he's writing the third person, it's always more fun and easier to write the bad guy, right? And so the thing that's great about Simon Risk is he used to be a really bad guy. So now he's a good guy, but he's always just scratched the surface, and you never know when that part of him is going to explode. So he's not necessarily a volatile. He keeps it under control, but he has this skill set, like Brian Mills said, that he can bring to bear when he has to. And so a lot of these books, the fun is you're waiting for this guy to freaking lose it and just unload on somebody, and people love that, because then he could put on this three-piece suit or tuxedo and look fantastic. But he's kind of like, the Cary Grant character, and he takes the thief, but bring him up to 2020, where he's got a really tough, he's not actually so suave and debonair. He's like the meanest SOB there is. He's always fighting to keep that under control. That makes it so much more fun to write. The protagonist is always the hardest, because they have to always be kind of so good. The thing is, this guy is good, but you never know, when he's going to lose it. So that's why I really enjoy it.
Well, he gets dragged into this situation in the palace because he is a good guy.
Well, yeah, he believes in honor. He's definitely has the honor code going, and so, and he learned that like a lot of criminals do. He learned that in prison. He wasn't a particularly honorable thief, but when he was in prison, he spent time with people who taught him that loyalty is everything, honor is everything. And when he's called upon to help a friend from the past, it's like he has no choice. He doesn't want to. He actually doesn't even particularly like this guy that much anymore. There's a woman that's come between them, but he says, "Heck, I've been called upon." The code comes into play. Off he goes.
Okay.
Well, I think this is really interesting, actually, because to me, when there's a shade of gray, the books become so much more interesting, rather than just when the hero is, he's the handsome son of a senator, and his girlfriend is a beautiful, former supermodel. Shades of gray make characters much more interesting and give the stories so much more heft and weight.
Indeed.
Yeah,
agree
being
100%.
the handsome son of a senator and having a supermodel girlfriend, I definitely chose not to write what I know. So.
Well, escapism, we all read and maybe even write for escapism, but that's not true for you, Matt, obviously. So Chris, you brought up the villain thing. So in your opinion, you've written a lot of thrillers, a lot of really successful thrillers. What in your opinion makes a really good villain?
Well, the villain has to, of course, have nefarious plans, but he has to believe that he's not really bad. I mean, he has to believe that even he's pursuing these ends, that they are actually the right ends to be pursuing. And, he doesn't see himself as being on the dark side. I mean, Darth Vader is like the best villain ever, right? Kind of, he knows he's bad, but he thinks that the dark side is really the way everything should be ruled, And, it's kind of like the people that support Donald Trump. It's like, oh,
here we go. I knew it. I knew this was going to happen.
Because he's got to speak up. It's like they actually think, people actually believe that like QAnon is real. I mean, for me, that is just so mind-boggling that someone can think this stuff is real. So kind of the same thing. They believe in themselves. And so the more you have a villain that has something that's really pursuing some kind of somewhat believable but really scary end, and truly, really is a true believer, that's a good character.
That's scary because it does. I think some of these villains that make you explore the dark side of even what you're capable of make some of the best villains, like Hannibal Lecter.
Oh my God, yeah.
Hannibal Lecter was a great villain, although some people might argue he was the hero. So, I mean, as you read that, because, as you read through that, there are people, and I have to admit, I rooted for him to outsmart the FBI, sure. and that's where the skill in writing those heroes or those villains come in. And I think that, in a lot of cases, and Matt, in Rick's case, the villain or the challenge doesn't necessarily come in as a human being. The challenges and the obstacles that heroes face aren't always a person. A lot of times they come from inside yourself. So, I mean, and maybe you would disagree, but do you think that's the case with Rick?
Oh, unquestionably. I mean, his biggest obstacle is himself most of the time. Getting out of his own way, going with his own gut too much, and being focused in on one thing and thinking even though he's not he's a zealot in some ways, but he's not necessarily overconfident. But when he gets a target, he's blind to everything else. So yeah, and then he does, like Nick was talking about, his character breaking the law, and you mentioned all living by their own codes, and Rick certainly lives by his own code. But at times he does question, because his code is handed down to him from his father, which is sometimes you have to do what's right even when the law says it's wrong, and which Rick does. But even at times he starts to question his own sense of right and wrong, and that's really why he was going to quit being a private eye, because I mean he's broken a lot of laws, and he's killed people, and you can maybe even say he's murdered people in some of the earlier books, and but always for the right. But he starts to think, well, it's my right. Does that doesn't every narcissistic leader or whatever think that way? So he starts to question that, and it's an ongoing inner turmoil with him, with decisions he makes. Is this real? Am I really doing the right thing? But he'll think about it, and then he'll do it anyway.
Yeah, and real people never do that, so that's good.
What are you going to say about Hannibal Lecter? Rooting for him and everything. I'm a bit of a foodie and a decent cook, and he's a really good cook. So I always root for the cook, the good chefs. So
I'm glad to know I wasn't alone in that. But as far as Rick is concerned, he does have a dog that he loves, so he can't be all bad. And then we have in Peter has June, so somebody loves him. So we see him, even though he's tortured and in different situations, he has I guess a mirror that we see him in. So Nick, when you wrote her, how did you decide who would be a good love interest or partner for Peter? What did you think that this character would have to have?
Well, Peter's a lot. He's got a lot of energy, kind of too much energy. You know, he's wound pretty tightly, and I needed somebody who was going to be a real match for him, and somebody who had that same level of energy and really wasn't going to put up with his crap, which is, again, I'm just writing from life because that's who I married. But, I mean, it's a useful thing, but that's really, I mean, to me, that's what makes, you know, writing about relationships interesting, is because you get to see another side of your character, and whether that relationship is with the dog or with the sweetheart or with the friend, you know, everything is an opportunity to illuminate your character. It's not just through, you know, the action on the page. It really is through how they relate to the people that they care about. June Cassidy, the new book, The Breaker, is really as much a June Cassidy book as it is a Peter Ash book. She's got a larger role in this, and really she is kind of the instigator of the action. And when Peter, for pretty good reasons, wants to sort of shy away from pursuing this, June says, you know what, you know, we do a lot of things for you. Now we're doing something for me. So suck it up. And Peter's got to sort of step up and you know, suck it up and do his thing. And so, you know, it's fun to do, and it's fun to, especially because I didn't want June to sort of be the girlfriend, right? I really want her to be a co-protagonist in a way. And her role, you know, comes and goes through the books. We really see the most of her here. But you know, to me, that's what makes having a partner for your hero a fun thing.
Okay. So now, Chris, we're going to go back to Simon.
Sure.
You want to talk about Simon and his love life, or?
You know, I'm a big believer. It's kind of like, you know, you can never really, no relationship can really be, it can be requited, but it can't go long term. He's kind of like, you know, he flies solo, and though the books are very serious and very, you know, suspenseful, there has to be at some point where he hooks up with some chick. That's just kind of one of the rules you got to do, you know. So, you know, I get to go and have my pick of these ones. You know, each book has a different love interest. You know, I'm divorced, but I was married to a very strong-willed and a woman that was integral in my success. So I totally dig what Nick is saying, and I think that's good for his books. For me, it's important. This guy kind of is more James Bondian, or more Jason Bourne after his girlfriend got killed. So he doesn't really rely upon, there's not usually too big of a female character in this. I can tell you something interesting though. These books just got sold to Apple TV, so it's going to be a TV series starring the British actor. Thank you, Aaron Taylor Johnson. And when they start taking apart your books, and they wanted him to have some kind of love interest, but not to be a spoiler, but so he does have more of a love interest in season 1, but all I can tell you is she don't make it to season 2.
Well, you know, I think whether as much as love interests tell you about the hero, the lack of love interest tells you about the hero. Right. You know, they're all tortured. Sure. They're damaged, and you know, are finding their way and struggling in their own way. Some might feel that they're lucky to find someone. Others might feel, you know, that they're burdened by having another person in their life. But I think all of those things and their friendships, you know, illuminate the character, and you know, make it easier for authors to show that side of their characters that people relate to. And I think that all three of you have done a really great job in helping us know who the characters are. So, you know, we talked about villains and we talked about heroes, but what we haven't talked about yet are stakes. And thrillers and mysteries require big thrillers, require big stakes. You know, deadly mysteries require large stakes too. So do you want to talk a little bit about the stakes in your books? Whoever wants to start, it's okay with me. Or do you have feelings on stakes? Not medium, well done.
I'll just start because certainly in my books, which are these, you know, big globe-trotting kind of loyalty blurring, bomb-ticking thrillers, the most important thing in the book almost is stakes, because it's what everyone is fighting for and fighting over and risking their lives for. So it certainly can't be anything petty. And I think that's the hard part, and the fun part is to come up with like, okay, you can't diffuse one more nuclear weapon. What's going to be the high stakes that makes people keep turning the pages? And yeah, so it's certainly with international thrillers, the stakes are high. I know with PI books and with lawyers, you're basically out to get a murderer, which is already high enough. It's on usually a smaller level, but even a more visceral, more personal level. So yeah, I mean, stakes are key.
Okay. Anybody else?
You know, for my guy, the stakes are much smaller than Nick or Chris's generally, I would think, in every book. But it's more of an internal battle. There's a plot, of course, and there's people in danger that he's trying to help, not always successfully. But there's also his internal struggle is can he be a better human? Can he be a functioning person, and can he be a better person? So stakes, yeah, stakes for me are difficult to write because it is. I just lost my light, which maybe won't make me the palest human being on earth, but no, I'm still very pale as I look at my picture, with a huge forehead. So the stakes, yeah, for me, I don't always be repeating the same thing with Rick trying to be to better himself in some ways and to solve the backstory of his wife's situation. So that's something I do. I don't really consider myself a thriller writer, although my publisher always wants to put thriller on the back of the book. I'm sure there's thriller on the back of this one too. I just think of it as crime. I'm a crime writer, but yeah, I perhaps struggle with making the stakes high enough. There's a lot of insular stuff, but I've dropped a few bodies in my book, so that counts too.
Well, for me, I think stakes really, I mean, they have to carry some emotional weight, right? If the nuclear bomb is going to blow up and everybody dies, gosh, that's too bad. But if there's no intimate emotional weight to that, it's to me personally, it's less interesting. And so I have some of my books have bigger stakes than others, but it really for me is about the emotional lives of the characters, and how much if I can get the reader to care about what happens to the characters, then everything else takes on a heightened, all the other stakes get higher. So to me, that's what makes them interesting. And it really just depends what, sort of what sandbox you're playing in. If you're writing, a PI novel, he's not going to run into a nuclear weapon. If you're writing,
one does.
But if he's blind, it's sight impaired.
It's a nuclear weapon with a braille keypad.
Yes.
So that he can, yeah. And instead of colored wires, they're textured wires.
Yes, you have to make those adjustments.
Nick, I just erased my answer in exactly what Nick said, because that really is right. And when Rick takes a case, the importance for me is where's the motivation for him. It maybe doesn't always come up in the beginning, but it's always found, and there has to be some emotional connection where he feels responsible for the people he's getting involved with. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, maybe the scale is not the issue as much as making it believable for the reader. That's going to be whatever it is, has to be something that's going to drive them to do something they wouldn't do ordinarily, and make it believable. So, I think the motivation issue is the important issue too, with stakes.
I was just going to add that exactly what the guy said is so right. And you can find a nuclear weapon, and really, who cares if 2 billion people you don't know get killed? It's if your mother's in there that's going to get killed that makes it important, or if you were somehow responsible. So, I always like hearing this and talking to other authors, because it always reminds me of the things I kind of, somehow leave out. It's like, damn, that's right. I got to, concentrate more on that. The emotional angle is always the most important angle to making a bestseller. It must make people turn the pages. They care about other people, to learn more about the human condition than you might know about yourself. So yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, so you guys all write about risks, whether they're personal risks or emotional risks or whatever. How big a risk taker are you? And what's the biggest risk you've ever taken, the biggest writing risk you've ever taken?
Well, if I can answer quickly, because it'll be my last answer and I have to go.
Yes.
My biggest writing risk was quitting my career running a big Swiss watch company when I was 35 to say I'm going to come become a novelist, having never written a short story, having never even tried to write a book, but saying, screw it, I'm going to do this and I want to make, you know, a living this way.
Wow.
So, I mean, for most of us, the biggest risk is the first book you write, because, you know, when you write a book, all your friends say, oh yeah, it's really good. You know, that doesn't mean anything. It's when you finally turn it in and see like a professional thing. So that's a scary moment, you know? So without doubt, that is the big risk, the kind of, you know, not a Kierkegaardian leap of faith, but maybe a John le Carré leap of faith to say, hey, I'm going to give this a shot.
Wow.
Okay, and anybody else who wants to reveal their soul to the American public next?
I got to go. Bye.
Okay, take
Thanks,
care, Chris.
Chris.
Congratulations
Thank you.
on,
Excuse me.
yeah, on your
Thank you.
deal.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, for me, the you know, to kind of echo Chris, quitting my day job really felt like a huge thing. I'd written 4 books before, you know, they paid me enough to make a living, and you know, suddenly you're floating out there where this thing that was your hobby, your sort of cherished, you know, play time, becomes what you do to pay the mortgage, and that's a deeply freaky moment, for sure. And I was a little farther ahead than Chris. I had 4 books under my belt, but it's a strange way to make a living. You know, physically, I'm a little bit of a risk taker. I'm a mountain biker and a you know, mountain climber and that kind of stuff. But you know, I do wear a helmet, and I don't smoke or any of those things.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So now your insurance actuaries are feeling better, Nick.
Oh wait, are you recording this?
Yeah.
Oh damn.
No, it's just us and a few thousand people. It's fine. Yeah, nobody will ever hear that. What about you, Matt?
Well, in terms of writing, the biggest risk was writing this last book, you know, first person character as a private investigator, blind. So I would say that, you know, I quit my day job a couple of years ago as well. And I can't say I'm actually making a living, which probably makes it a bigger risk because, you know, I've got some runway and I've got, there's an end date with that. So, you know, and I don't plan on getting another job. So I have to make a living at it.
So do you look at this as taking a risk? Do you look at the writing as a risk?
You mean no longer having
Yeah.
income? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
steady income. Yeah,
Yeah.
to some degree, yeah. But
There's no net.
right. Yeah.
You know, and you don't know how well the next book will do. You don't know. Publishing is in a total state of flux. You don't know, you know, kind of what's going to happen next. It is not for the faint of heart in any way.
Right. And I'm with a smaller publisher. I'm, you know, hoping at some point to break out. So, you know, I just at one point, there's been some illness in my family that can be hereditary. And as a member of my family is going through a really tough time. And I saw him a couple of years ago at Thanksgiving. I mean, I see him every year. But I just looked at him, and the toughest, strongest, smartest guy I know, and he's been dealt a horrible curveball because of genetics. And I thought to myself, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and this is what I want to do. So I'm gonna go. And I quit my job. You know, I took another year, and then I quit my job 2 years ago. And you know, I get a little net, but it shrinks and grows from here and there. But yeah, I decided why go another 10 years with that steady income where I would be okay, you know, if I quit then and had a net. But I don't know. It's time to go. I thought it was time to go, so I did.
No, I remember when you did that. So I think Nick brought up something that really struck me, is when the thing you love turns into the thing that you have to do. How do you both still feel about writing?
Nick seems like he has a good time doing it, but I don't. I think it's hard. As I'm writing each book, you know, I'm in a writer's group, less so with this last book. Blind Vigil. And as I bring in, pages to read each week, and I think, well, this is crap. How's this going to end up? And then by the time I'm done with that first draft, I feel like this is not that bad. It's not as bad as I feared. But when I'm in the middle of the book, I'm pretty convinced that I've lucked out for 6 or 7 books. They're going to pull back the veil and see what a hack I am now. And that's going to be it. But then somehow, revision, I get it. Okay, that I can live with it.
Matt, I have talked to more New York Times bestsellers than you can imagine who 20 books in, 30 books in, still feel the same way. This is just the condition of being a writer, is that I read somewhere that writing a novel, I love this quote, writing a novel is like inventing a new mathematical formula every time, right? Because you're not allowed to, it's not like running a business where you refine the product and you streamline the process and you just make a better widget. You have to make a totally different widget, right? You have to do something different. There is no recipe. And I think, part of the necessary makeup for being able to manage the life of a writer is that you have to learn to be okay with that kind of uncertainty and self-doubt. And it's because it's inescapable. And because we are essentially doing this alone, I know there are, writing partnerships and I love these conversations because it reminds me that I am not, I'm not the only one who has this disease, right? But the other thing, I got my first real job in the world was as a roofer's helper. And so that entailed climbing a ladder and carrying shingles up to the real roofers, 2 stories up, 3 stories up. And so, when I compare, when I was 20 and, reshingling a 45-degree pitched roof, 3 stories up a Victorian, tearing off 3 layers of shingles on a hot August day in Michigan, writing ain't that, right? I'm not digging ditches. I'm not doing demolition. I've done all those things, but I am putting myself on the page. There's a different level of risk here, personally, emotionally. And I think if you are the kind of writer where you are putting yourself into your books, and Matt, I think you are absolutely that kind of writer, it does feel risky.
All right.
And I think that's what makes the work interesting.
Right.
Just because I'm banging my forehead against the wall, the goal is that you don't know any of that. When you read my books, I want you to be having fun, and I want you to be turning the pages, and I want to see you, I want your heart rate elevated, and I want you to laugh at my jokes and be shocked at the terrible things that happen. But that's not what it's like in the course of my work day. I do have days where it's like a trance. And I look up and 3 hours have gone by and I've written my 1,200 words. But that is not what the average writer's day is like for me.
Yeah, you mentioned risk, and this isn't digging ditches or working on roofs, but you said you're also I think you're also revealing with each book, no matter what you write, if you're doing it well, you're revealing your soul in some ways. You have to. What I write, I have to make it good, and so that's a risk too. Do I really want to allow people this close to me?
Yeah.
Generally, I don't. So I'm divorced.
Well, and it's not only like revealing yourself, but you're revealing yourself to a lot of people, and you're
my case, tens and tens of people.
Tens. Well, after today, I know people are going to run out and buy Blind Vigil, so I think that's all going to change.
Dozens and dozens.
But that's just how I see it. But I think you're also revealing yourself to critics. Writing and literature and music and arts are people. You have critics who are always looking to help you make things better, and then you have readers who just want to enjoy what you write. So, but as
I'm not sure critics are always trying to make things better.
That may have had a touch of sarcasm.
Very generous. Yeah, that's very generous.
So, you know, it's hard because, you know, when you look at all those reviews, which are the reviews on Amazon that stick with you? It's not the one that says, oh my God, I love it. It's
Right.
the one that really somehow finds its way in there, that sticks in your head, that is the critique. It's like, how did I miss that? You know, or how did I not get to that one person?
No, I don't read those reviews.
Yeah, you just
you
skip
know,
right over those.
there's only one that I read, and I reread it all the time because they called my book a breathless kinetic masterpiece, and so that's what I want to have in my head because that's what I need to keep going. I don't need to feel my. I mean, you guys are in California, so you'll appreciate this. I don't want any of this negativity, man.
That's right. Well, well, okay. So this is interesting since you brought up the woo stuff. So when you're writing is very much an outflow of idea and emotion. So how do you refill? What do you do to stay inspired, to stay productive, to stay creative? Or are you just
Well, for
both
one
thinking,
thing,
oh my God, I got to sell these books or else I can't pay my mortgage?
Well, I mean,
That helps.
well, that's it. I mean, you are under contract. There is that, you know, you do have to make a living or get close. And when you're writing a series, I'm sure Nick feels the same of this. Some of this is that you don't want to rewrite that same story over and over again, just putting it in different circumstances. And that's something I have to think about. And so getting inspired can be difficult, but ironically, saying that, what comes to me first is always the subplot for my guy, for Rick. What internal deal is you're going to deal with? And for me, the difficulty is finding a story, a plot that's interesting or that he can intertwine his subplot with. But I don't know, you know, I think if I start thinking about that, like, how am I going to get back into it? I'll never do it because I feel like that all the time. The easiest thing for me to do is not write. So I just have to sit down in front, and if I got nothing in my head, I just have to sit down in front of the keyboard. The keyboard is kind of a stimulus for me, and just start bad stories, bad prose, even surprisingly, you'd be surprised.
That's shocking.
Yeah. I can tell you how many awkward sentence notes I get from my writers group and my editor. But once I get, I just got to put yourself in the position. That's how it works for me. Get in the position and tough through it, grind through it. And then eventually I always find the true meaning of the book I'm writing and the true, and then, I find some flow.
Well, visual artists talk about this kind of stuff a lot. And my wife started this podcast where she's talking with visual artists about kind of what their work lives are like and how they confront sort of these questions. And it's really interesting to me how similar it is to kind of the challenges that the writers I know and that I face. And part of it for me is about ritual in the morning, right? I try to get up at the same time. I try to, I make some coffee, I make some breakfast, I carry it all up to my office, I open the document. And I sort of eat my breakfast and I stare at I stare at what I worked on yesterday. And at a certain point, the sentence will sort of, I'll sort of say, well, that sentence needs, I gotta fix that. And I'll put down my breakfast and I'll get to the keyboard and I'll, and then it just sort of starts from there. But I don't know, do you read a lot of crime fiction, Matt? Are you like, what are you reading to fill the well? Are you reading to fill the well?
I'm not really reading to fill the well, but I read crime fiction almost exclusively, and I don't worry about it influencing my work. I've never really thought of that, although I've had great influencers, obviously, throughout my life. Chandler, McDonald, Crace, Connolly, Jefferson Parker, among others, Walter Mosley, among others. But I don't really worry about that. It took me 19 years. It took me 10 years to get published, so by the time I finally was published, I had my own voice. But I just love that. I love the genre, and it's a huge. There's so many subgenres. You can read whatever you want, and there's so many good writers and I always learn. Yeah, I do learn for sure. I just did an event with Lee Goldberg on Friday night. We were doing Murder by the Book in Houston.
He's a great guy.
Great guy, great writer, prolific, smart guy.
Hilarious.
Yeah, and I was reading his latest book. Where is it? I got it here. Bone Canyon. Anyway, no, it's over there. And I was doing what I do when I read a Connolly book, is I was dog-earing a lot of. I don't write police procedurals, but it's good for me to know. You know, I have cops in my extended family, and there's David Putnam, who Maddie knows, a former sheriff's deputy. I always get stuff from him, but I mean, Lee had his research was so good that I dog-earing pages like I do with Connolly for police procedural stuff. So I cheat that way, but yeah, I love reading the genre, but sometimes I don't really have the choice of what I can read in the genre. Sometimes you say you'll do something, you'll blurb something or something like that. And, or right now, say that you will judge, not one, but 2 awards this year.
So who are
So
you,
I'm
who
gonna
are
be
you
reading
working
the
on?
genre a lot, and I won't have any choice of. What about you?
Well, wait, hey, Nick, before you answer that, what do you, can you say what
No.
contest? Okay.
You're not allowed to.
Okay, go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
A lot of books, I'll tell you that.
A lot of books.
A lot of books. Yeah, no, that's hero's work, man. I can't imagine doing, because I know what that workload is like to do just a single award. So that's a heavy load of work. Yeah, I read crime fiction. I read science fiction is kind of my escape. If I can find really good, there's a lot of bad science fiction, like there's a lot of bad crime writing. So if I can find something that's really good that because it's often kind of different from what I do. But I read all kinds of stuff, as long as there's some actual story involved. I mean, I'm kind of living in a suburban domestic drama, so that interests me a little bit less. But I don't know, like I read the news, I read the paper, I read, the New Yorker is a great source of really good prose and kind of strange ways to look at the world. I listen to podcasts to sort of again, kind of strange new ways to think about things. But I think for me, I can only the story can only move forward at a certain pace for me. I can't, if I work for 12 hours, I'm not going to get any more done than if I work for 6. So, part of it for me is I also kind of need to, and this is hard for me, I'm working on this, is to have a little bit more of a life. Because I'm not a super fast writer. I've been writing a book a year for the last 5 years, but that's not, that's a hard thing for me. I have friends who write and publish 4 times as many words as I do in a given year. Yeah. And that's a little humbling. And so part of what I'm trying to do is to sort of, spend more time with friends, kind of do all of that other stuff so that you have more of a life to draw on. I think if you, for me, when I'm the most stressed out about deadline, and the most sort of lasered in on the work, that's, in a way, the work is worse when I'm all tensed up and that doesn't, I'm not a fan of deadlines, and that doesn't mean they don't exist for me like they do for everybody else. But I spend a lot of my time trying to relax.
Yeah, it's something I have to think about too, is smelling the roses every once in a while, and I'm not very good at it. Of course, right now it's difficult, but for anybody. But yeah, that's funny that enjoying life a little more, I think.
Yeah.
Good for
so I gotta say, the blinding your protagonist just kind of boggles my mind. Like that, I am so in awe of that choice. Like, huge props to you for that. And I don't know. I gotta see this book because I want to know what you've done. I saw, I was signing at a bookstore yesterday, and so I know you've got books in Madison. But I was in a hurry, so.
You were signing in a bookstore?
Well, so I have a virtual event there next week. So my book comes out on Tuesday. Yeah. Cool. So I went in to sign books in person. And they're open. They allow, I don't know, it's like eight people in. So I showed up and I, signed a couple dozen books and flew out again. And I usually when I have an event in the bookstore, I try to buy a couple books, and I want to know because independent bookstores are so wonderful, and that the people who work there are so well read, and I get turned on to great authors that way.
Right.
But because I'm, I don't want to take the spot of a a real browsing customer.
Right.
I've been trying to sort of hurry through, and so this year I have not been able to buy a bunch in process, but yeah, I'm just astonished at that choice in a series, and I have to say I'm in awe, and I admire the hell out of that.
Well, thanks. You read the book, you might change your mind, but thanks.
So I think that, Nick's point, you could have ended the series and you could have written yourself into the end of your series. So that is risky, and you wonder what's going to happen next.
Well, believe me, as I was writing the book, I thought it would be a perfect place to end the series, honestly. Lost Tomorrows, the last book. And I just signed on I just turned in 8 and I signed on for 9 and 10.
Congratulations.
I love.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. I mean, there's a business side that a lot went into I'm not gonna say agreeing to do it, but to signing the contract, to thinking about it, thinking about where I need to go next. But I thought actually that I was going to be done for a while. I don't ever want to stop writing Rick Cahill or his group of friends. Maybe I'll start writing more instead of Rick. I don't know. But I do need to try something different soon. And it was a tough decision, honestly, to sign on the next 2, which sounds stupid. I mean, I'm really happy that my publisher wants me to write them, and happy to do it. I love my publisher; they're great people. But there's a point where I have to try to do something else. And so there's a lot of decision I don't know what this question didn't come up. I just volunteered it, but yeah. But as I was finishing 8, I thought, well, this would be a good place. I could have finished it on 8 too, the one I just turned in. But I don't really want to finish it, and I do have concerns of getting stale, things like that. But my publisher and my agent seem to like the book I just turned in. But yeah, I can't imagine not writing Rick Cahill. But there are other things I need to do for probably economic reasons.
What about you, Nick? What do you see as the future for Peter Ash?
Well, like Matt, I think I'll always be writing Peter books at some point. I mean, but these are a certain kind of book, and my goal is to have them be as different from each other as possible. And one of the wonderful things about this series, and I'd love to take credit for it, but I think it sort of happened by accident, is that there are really only 3 continuing characters in the series, and each book takes place in a different place. He's gone from Milwaukee to the West Coast, to Colorado, to Memphis, to Iceland, and now back to Milwaukee. So, but I get to tell really a whole different range of stories. And there are stories where Peter is in league with law enforcement. There are stories where Peter is in opposition to law enforcement. In this book, he's on the FBI's wanted list, so he's really on the run in The Breaker. So there are all of these possibilities, but it's still a certain kind of voice, and it's at a certain scale. And it's funny. I was thinking about what Chris said about one of the things that his hero has got a different girlfriend in every book, and I love having the ongoing relationship with Peter and June, but Peter doesn't get to fall in love again. Peter doesn't get to meet somebody new again, if that's an ongoing relationship, and those are a lot of fun to write. So in part, I want to be able to tell different kinds of stories. Something, maybe without quite so much violence, or maybe a different kind. He's an ex-military guy, and these are books that have a certain amount of violence in them, and violence is really one of the subjects of the series for sure, because the condition that Peter's in is really as a consequence of the violence of his war life. But I had a contract for 2 Peter Ash books, and then I had a contract for a 3rd Peter Ash book and a 4th, maybe standalone. And my publisher said, we really want to see another Peter Ash book. And then I had a contract for 5, 6, and 7, where the 7th was going to be a standalone, but now it's another Peter Ash book. And so there's a certain point where it's like I'm starting to get a little, and I'm partway into that book, and I'm you know I'm you know, it's again it's something that's different, it's something that's fun, but you know, there are other muscles I want to flex. I want to try some new things,
Right.
and like you, Matt, I think there's a point at which you know, you're sort of afraid that you're just a one-trick pony, and you want to you know, stretch a little.
Right.
And I'm, you know, like you, I'm trying to stretch with every book. I'm trying to, you know, if I'm not vaguely terrified, you know, by what I'm trying to do with every book, I don't feel like I'm really pushing myself very, very hard.
Right.
But there are also, you know, there are different levels of terror, and I would love to be trying something else. And so I think at a certain point, maybe that'll be the book after the one I'm working on, to do something different.
I think
Well,
writing
go
your
ahead.
protagonist in a steady relationship is the hardest thing to do, quite honestly. I'm just starting to do that. And I've been able to kind of ship her off to Santa Barbara because she has a job. That's where she makes her income until something's going to happen in the next book. But I think that's difficult because it is fun writing, and the new love interest in his first 3 books, there were a couple love interests, and there was also this ex-girlfriend who was always in the background. But I do think that having a steady how do you make everyday life in a relationship, not that that's, you're writing that in a very small bit, but how do you bring something unique and interesting to that's really hard. It's not
Yeah.
Nick and Nora. What was Nick and Nora? What was their last name?
Oh,
Nick and
I don't
Nora.
know. That's the Thin Man.
Thin Man, yeah.
Yeah,
I
Nick
mean,
and Nora Thin Man.
right. That's hard.
yeah. So, first of all, no, after hearing you guys talk, nobody's going to want to sit next to you in the Starbucks because they're going to be afraid that you're going to explode. So that'll be fine. Don't let them go get their coffee before you. Just let them go ahead. But so you were talking about writing your series, and I know there's a commercial aspect to that, and you have time and balance and whatever in your life. Could you ever write more than one thing at one time?
Good question. I've sort of been tasked by my agent to do something this year. Give her something by the end of the year, not another book, but just some chapters and a new idea for something out there after book 10. So yeah, it's gonna be that's gonna be a bit of a challenge for me, because I not only that, because I have a podcast, and I had CJ Box on a year ago or so maybe, and it was one of the years where he put 2 books out. I said, how do you write 2 books in a year? He said, I really don't. I write them in about 18 months. Like, you write a Joe Pickett book, and then he'll write, I'm blanking on his next character. Series character is a great, now she's a private eye, was in law enforcement. So he'll sort of have something going, and it'll take, he's not churning out 2 a year. It's over a longer process.
No, he's doing 3 in 2 years.
Right. But that would be difficult. I mean, him and Connolly, and of course, Connolly's writing a freaking series as well. But yeah, for my speed, that's going to be difficult. But it's something I told myself when I quit my day job that it's something I should be doing. I thought I'd be turning out 3 books in 2 books in 3 years. 3 books in 2 years, I thought I'd be doing, but I'm not on that pace yet, and I need to find a way. But I'd love to have that problem where I was under contract from 2 different publishers or maybe 1 publisher to get 3 books in 2 years.
I know people who do that, and it is a, if you think you're working hard now,
Right.
I mean, it's a really interesting, and I think it takes a certain kind of person to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is just, I have more stories I want to tell, and the faster that I can tell them, the more I get to do before I die. Right. I mean, that's kind of the way, how I think about this. But I'm like you, I can only, I haven't quite figured out how to work at a faster pace yet. And there's, sometimes life intervenes, and, I had this mountain bike accident, tore up my shoulder, and that screwed up my whole schedule. And, it's just I don't know, but like, I'm sure you have other stories that are bouncing around in your head, other characters,
Not really. I mean, I have an idea for a standalone. I don't think it would be another series. It's something that I'd seen on 48 Hours that I thought I could twist a little bit. But I really, I really don't have. I'm kind of single-minded. I mean, there's a lot of vignettes, perhaps, but nothing that I feel I could flesh out. But I'm very single-minded when I write, and that's why when people ask me to write a short story or something in the middle of writing a novel, I'm always behind in the novel. I think I'm always behind the novel. So
Yeah, me too.
I always say no. I say thanks and no. For one thing, I don't write short stories, but yeah, but I need to challenge myself. That was my New Year's resolution was to challenge myself. And I forgot what the other part was. So we'll just have to go with challenge.
Okay, so Nick, we've talked before too, and I know how you feel about genres, and I know how you feel about your work being shoehorned into a genre. But as I was looking through the reviews, I kept seeing techno thriller. Oh, what in general? I'm not going to ask you about the genre thing because both of your books really transcend genre because they have so many components of other books in there. But what can people expect from a book written by Nick Petrie? I'm sorry.
Well, it's strange to. I mean, this is more of a technology book. This is the second book now where we are kind of in June's world, and June is a technology journalist. So that's part of what happens in this book, but that's not really what I write about normally.
More in a general perspective. If somebody picks up a book that you've written, what can they expect to find?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really think about it that way, but I can try to think about it that way.
Why don't you hope that ahead of time? Damn it!
Yeah, no, because then you guys don't get that look of panic that I so enjoy.
That's how you know you're doing your job.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could look at it another way, and how do you hope that people feel when they finish reading your books?
Well, so I want things to happen at a certain pace, right? I want to write something where the story is interesting enough and exciting enough, and I want to start out with things being pretty exciting. I'm not someone who generally likes to sneak up on something interesting, and I'm really interested in writing about sort of the ramifications of a social issue. So my second book was about sort of the unintended consequences of technology. My third book was about the newly legal cannabis industry in Colorado. My fourth book was about race and class in the Mid-South. My fifth book was, kind of leaning in again on sort of veterans. Peter really has a post-traumatic stress relapse in that book. And it's also kind of a man against nature book because it's set in Iceland in winter. So, I really feel like for me, I like crime fiction to be about something, to be there to be some aboutness there. So it's not just, all, shooty, fighty, beat 'em up stuff. I want the characters to be vivid and real and somebody you might want to either, have coffee or a beer with, or maybe cross the street to get away from. I want my villains to be vivid and I really liked what Chris said about how you want your villains to really be convinced of their rightness. And I think, there's a saying in fiction that, the villains need to be the hero in their own mind. And I really believe in that as well. And that's the way to make your villains vivid. But for me, it's if the characters don't jump off the page and there aren't any emotional stakes and there isn't some level of humor, whether it's a little bit of slapstick in the action or a little bit of, the male relationships or the male-female relationships really need to, kind of be interesting and compelling. I mean, I want the book to really be working on a number of different levels. I don't know if that actually answers your question at all.
No, I think anybody who heard that would have a really good idea of what they were in for when they bought one of your books. So Okay, Matt, I'm going to ask you that same question. You want me to repeat it, or were you paying attention? Sorry.
No, I was just drifting.
Oh, that's right.
Um,
Okay.
no,
Thanks.
I think I have.
Thanks.
So,
Again, I wanted to say what Nick said.
yeah.
Now, I don't have a, like, as Nick started out and then he realized really what he did want his readers to know in quite detail, which was interesting. I just want them to be entertained, but I guess I want them to be on Rick's side, even as he does some questionable things, and root for him obviously when he breaks the law at some point, but I always want him to be on the edge in terms of decisions he makes. And for me, that's the difficulty in writing him sometimes, because I really, there aren't too many people that he's friends with, or that even has, you want tension on every page. And I really adhere to that. And like in his interpersonal relationships, or even dealing with store employees, or maybe when he's researching something, I want him to always like push the edge. He's single-minded and wanting to get to the truth, but and manipulative sometimes. And so I'm throwing that out there, but he internalizes it sometimes and realizes what he's doing and justifies it. But with all that, I want the readers to somehow root for him, while they're kind of realizing, I don't think I'd like this guy to be my friend and my everyday friend, but maybe I go on the journey because inside in his soul, there's goodness there that doesn't always show. So I just think about him being entertained. I don't really think about, I think sometimes thematically what I'm doing with Rick, but I don't think on a greater scale. I don't really think about things on a greater scale. Maybe sometimes they come out. There are some occasional observations by Rick or someone else about not really social issues. Sometimes it's really kind of poking at celebrity and our society throughout the world focus on celebrity, but I don't really have a grand scale for what I just wanted to be entertained. But I wanted to. Can you get on board with this guy one more time when he kind of makes some? You talk about reading reviews. You read like. I'll read a review where somebody said, he's not a very good private. He made a mistake here. I go, yeah, he made a mistake. He makes mistakes. That's part of the deal. He's not the best private eye, but and I'm sorry, but he's never going to be.
Well, and I also think I have to have a disclaimer. I've been friends for a long time. If you talk to Matt for a few minutes or listen to him, you might have some idea of some of the humor that's in his books. And the word dry replaced with arid sense of humor that sometimes you see in the book. And I think that there's, like Nick was saying, also there's humor in both those books. So serious as our conversation has been, there are releases and they are so entertaining and they are roller coaster. Don't use cliches.
And I had the misfortune of following Matt at an event at the Anaheim Library last year. And I had my the little bit I was going to say, we each had, I think, 20 minutes or something. And Matt gets up and just riffs for 20 minutes. The audience is just howling with laughter. And the whole time I'm thinking, I have to follow this. I have to go after this guy.
I've got one story I can tell whenever any event I go to. And so I do that. And then you got up and actually talked about interesting things. And I thought, shit, I got to start doing that.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being here and talking to us today and being so open and entertaining. And I hope that everybody goes out and buys your books. I do read both of your books. Honestly, I don't do commercials, but they're fabulous and great. And I'm going to turn, well, I guess I just want to say thank you both for being here. I had a good time. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I know everybody who listened enjoyed themselves. And now I'm going to turn it over to Carol for questions.
This has been so wonderful. And I'm wondering, what are you currently reading, both of you?
Well, like I said, I'm even already been getting books in for the reading I have to do. I'm reading to blurb somebody actually right now. So I read Bone Canyon by Lee Goldberg, which is very good. We were, like I said, we did Murder by the Book Friday night, I think it was. And so we both, because it was in conversation with us, you know, in a remote event. So we both gave each other our books and we read them. And I put together like 12 solid questions, I thought. And then when we got to the event, John McDougall, who's great at Murder by the Book, he hosted us. So we were both expecting to have to, you know, probe each other with questions, and John did the whole thing. So, but I do recommend Bone Canyon by Lee Goldberg.
Yeah, if you like police procedurals, that series, that's the second in the series. And Lee's earlier work there's a lot of comedy in some of his earlier stuff. And this, it's really turned down in a way that it just sort of pokes its head out from time to time, but it is quite funny. And they are really very vivid in their depictions of police life. The stories of how he happened into this world is kind of an interesting one.
Right. Yeah. Surprising that Lee would have an interesting story.
Yes.
You know, the thing I didn't get a chance. Lee should be listening to this. I'll send him a link later. The question I didn't get to ask or mention when I was with him was, you want to learn how to write secondary characters. That's a great book, because he had he's got Eve Ronan, which is a great name, a young homicide cop who's really head over, you know, she's really driven. And you've got her soon to retire partner, the older white overweight guy who loves donuts. And you think, well, here's a cliche, and it's not at all. He's not at all a cliche. He's a really interesting, smart character. And I thought that was so well done. So if you want to kind of learn about police procedurals and how to write secondary characters, read Bone Canyon. And that's enough, Elite.
Well, you both seem to be inspired by him. Are there any other authors that inspire you with your genre?
Sure. For my genre, you know, particularly because I write PIs, there's a Robert Crace and T. Jefferson Parker is writing about a private eye now. Of course, Raymond Chandler, Ross McDonald, Walter Mosley. The list goes on specifically, but there's a writer that I read. I don't know if you have one, Nick, a writer you read where you go, she's writing like prose and I'm signing my name in X's like I'm in the West, the old West.
Yeah.
That's Megan Abbott. Anytime I read a Megan Abbott book, I go, no, that's different than what I do. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, she's pretty astonishing. The stuff that I read, I have a couple of books that I go back to over and over again when, you know, there are moments when days or weeks when I feel like I've forgotten how to write sentences. So I'll go back to Cormac McCarthy's Border Trilogy. The first one is All the Pretty Horses, which is, you know, what I love about that is it's just a cowboy novel, right? This is Louis L'Amour turned up to the level of art, and it's teenage boys on horses in post-war Mexico, and there's a knife fight, and there's the beautiful daughter of the Mexican ranch owner. I mean, it's got things that could be that are tropes that could very easily be cliches, and just just falling into his language and the sentences and my books, there's a lot of that takes place outdoors, and he writes so beautifully about place. I'm really interested in place as well. So, you know, I'm a big rereader. I've just read a couple books for blurbs, and that's something that comes up periodically. But I'm kind of dipping into all kinds of stuff just because for me there's so much stuff that it's like, okay, I've read this before. I'm always looking for something that feels new and different, and it's not always that easy to find. And then there are also, you know, old friends I go back to, right? There are, Mark Graney writes these sort of propulsive spy novels.
Yeah.
And it's very different from what I do, both in terms of the kinds of stories he tells and the ways that he tells them. But, you know, I can lay on the couch for 3 hours and get lost, which is why I became a reader to begin with, was, you know, for that feeling of escape. So, you know, I mean, boy, there's a, you know, Greg Hurwitz, I've got his new book on my pile.
What a great writer Greg is.
Yeah, that's a great series. What have I got? I've been rereading Lawrence Block. Yeah, I mean, he's got a series that starts in the late 80s, I think, in the early 80s, maybe, in New York, about an alcoholic ex-cop,
Yeah.
unofficial PI.
Oh yeah, why am I blanking on his name? Yeah, Matt Scudder.
Yeah. And they're you know, they start out very workmanlike, and by the fourth book they really are elevated into something quite gorgeous, and he's really doing very different things. And the series is, I think, 17 or 18 books. So if you haven't read him, you know, there's a lot to dip into. And this is probably my third or fourth time through the series.
You know, and I don't know, you guys didn't mention him, but I love James Lee Burke.
Sure.
Absolutely. I went back and reread his first because I was going to reread his latest one. And just, yeah, that poetry of language, it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, so different.
Nick, if you're short on books, I'm getting them in the mail every day now. I'll send you some up.
Oh my God, please do. When you're done,
rank them and send me back the ranking. Just kidding.
If anybody on your committee is watching, that's a joke. Go on.
I was just wondering, Nick, earlier you were saying that, you know, you make your cup of coffee and you go and your breakfast and you go upstairs and you sit at your desk and reread maybe what you did the day before and kind of go through the process. Is that pretty typical of the process that you do each day to center yourself and write? And what happens when you sit there and nothing comes?
Well, that happens most days. So there are sort of two schools of thought in terms of how a person should write a book. And there are people who really want to outline and plan ahead. And then there are people like me who make it up as they go along. And we are called pantsers, or seat of the pantsers. So I really wish I was an outliner, but I have never been able to create any work. I've never been able to produce anything where I work that way. So for me, I have all of these, little internal hacks for how to keep myself moving the story forward when I'm really not sure what happens. Sometimes I just hit the caps lock button and then I just start typing in all caps because it's not real that way to me. And sometimes I keep a journal and I write by hand, and sometimes I'll write forward that way because I have found that writing by hand it'll stimulate different parts of my brain. It's a different thing than actually sitting at a keyboard. I've got a big artist notebook right here where I'm planning, for I'm sort of trying to think ahead a little bit, or I've written myself into a corner and I have to figure out either how to get out of it or what to revise. So I have multiple techniques that I use that I've developed over the years about kind of how to unscrew up my brain, or how to encourage myself to work forward. If you go to school, if you get your master's in fine arts, there's a lot of discussion about the writer's voice, and I really feel like that's all fine and good, but if you really are going to be a working writer, it's really about finding your process. It's finding how you work and how you can successfully get from page one to the end. And I think there are a lot of, one of the reasons why I talk about why it's the fact that it's challenging to write, is that for when I was an aspiring author, I thought it was easy for everybody else. You read a book that's been it's the fourth draft and two editors have looked at it and two copy editors have looked at it, and it's crisp and clean and gorgeous, and that's not really what it looks like, and it was really kind of a revelation for me to figure out that it's hard for everybody. And so if you are an aspiring novelist, the fact that, you know, you show up to work on the book and really what you would rather do is to pound your head with a brick, welcome to the joy of writing. I mean, this is just kind of what it's like sometimes.
Yeah. For me, it's similar. You know, we mentioned Lawrence Block, and Carol asked if you go over what you did the day before, and I always do. And I got that when I was complete guppy writer from reading a Lawrence Block book, how to write. I forget the name of it. A lot of great authors, mystery authors, talk about their process. But that's something he'd always done, is he goes back and revises what he did the day before, and I do that too. And that's really great for a blank pager. I always call it blank pager. That was an homage to Chandler, who said you had to look at the blank page on the keyboard every day, or the typewriter every day. But that's a great way for us pantsers to get back into the story. And also, like Nick, I do although I don't outline, I do have a general idea where the story's going. So if I'm really stuck, if I pounded my head on the wall for a couple hours and I'm just stuck, I will write out a scene later in the book that I know I have to write. And I'll write that, and I'll work on that until I can fix the problem. But I don't get too scared when I'm in a corner and I can't figure out how to get out, because generally I think it helps you find the way of the true meaning of the book. It always has for me. But you know, it just kind of sucks when you're in the middle of it. But corners, writing myself into corners, I do it all the time, and I think it's a good place to be if you can finally get out of there. But I think Nick and my process are pretty similar, and I do feel sorry for him for that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really wonderful. And 90 minutes went by so quickly. So, and we're just a little bit over. But I want to remind our viewers that the information on our authors is available on our website. And if you'd like information on that, you can go there. Books can also be purchased through local bookstores and I'm sure on Amazon and a number of other sources. We will be sending out an evaluation by email. We would really like to know that the programs that we are offering virtually are relevant. So please let us know that you appreciate them and what you like about them, and make suggestions. If you'd like to support the Museo, donations are always appreciated, and you can do that through our link. I would like to thank our authors, Christopher Reich, Nick Petrie, and Matt Coyle for this enlightening presentation this afternoon. And of course, it would not have been possible without Maddie Margarita for assembling such an amazing August assembly of authors. Do you like that word, August? Panel of authors. And special thank you to our viewing audience for tuning in this afternoon. And on behalf of the Museo, stay well, stay safe, and make this new year the best ever. See you next time.